actually taking a death case to the Supreme Court in California and winning, that made an impression on them. But I was a stupid kid.
In your industry, that's like facing Goliath and winning. How did you feel that?
And, I insured Drake's home and other famous people down in Malibu. I insured the Rolling Stones concert during COVID. They say, you can't talk to Mick and Keith. I'm like, okay, well, then I'm not insuring them. They don't want to talk to me. It's like they're Wizard of Oz, right? They want to hide behind lawyers or brokers or agents, and I can't ever make them happy.
The headline was,
2 drunk brothers beat up cops at O'Hare or something like that. And anyway, they arrest my brother. They arrest me, and I'm charged with felony assault on a police officer. So, they gave me the chance to plead guilty to misdemeanor. And
Rick Lindsey is the renegade of insurance, founder of Prime and X Insurance, who built a $450 million empire. With over 40 years in the game, he's known for fighting claims others settle. His no BS leadership and relentless growth have made him a force every entrepreneur should know. One of the things I do want to outline or talk about is early years. I know you were into sports. You originally wanted to be in the NFL or be a football player. Is that correct?
Well, originally. Then I got into hockey at 12. Wasn't a big hockey town, but we had High-G Ice Arena, which was an outdoor ice. They made ice there. That's where you went and got crushed ice and blocked ice. And so I pretty much lived there, tried out. I'd go to hockey school every summer with the Wisconsin Badgers coach. And Wisconsin Badgers is like the best college hockey. And they became Herb Brooks and all them became the Olympic team. And so they asked me to go try out for the Olympic hockey team. 4 kids from every state. And the other kid I remember, Bobby Green, was the goalie here, and we were on the travel team. And so, but about halfway through, the camp, it was 90 days long. It was obvious who was going to make it and who wasn't. And that's when I started, thinking, holy crap, because I thought I was going to be a professional hockey player. Thought I'd make the Olympic hockey team. And then it's like being a good golfer, and then you go golf and Tiger Woods is there. And it's like, I don't think this is going to work out for me. So anyway,
I mean, when you're saying that, that's like your first dream was to be a professional athlete. Could you take yourself back to that mindset, that moment? Like, how did that feel to you when you were in it? Was it devastating? Next? You know what I mean?
I mean, again, I'd been the kid who always thought school was stupid. And, and again, school is valuable. And I think for whatever reason, I've never felt at a disadvantage because I didn't go to college, but most people assume I did go to college. And, at some point in the insurance world, when you're dealing with people, they ask you, they think I'm a lawyer. Yeah. And then they want to know what school I went to. And, they went to Yale or Harvard or somewhere. And when you say nowhere, they think you're a dirtbag. So, you definitely, are at a disadvantage if you're going to go to work for somebody else, right? And then I think because you can do it, or I could do it without going to college, it kind of, if I could go back in time, it kind of encouraged my kids that you don't need a college degree. And I think all my kids would benefit from a college degree because they're not me.
Interesting, right? And the path that you took inevitably, like at the peak now, obviously no one's going to be like, you would have been better off with college. So that's cool. You and I both have that affinity. I was a college dropout. So I went to one semester. I was like, this isn't for me. Right. It was community college and then been in entrepreneurship ever since. So first dream, pro athlete. In the midst of that, you're figuring out what's next. What was the next step? You went to, wasn't it your father's?
Yeah. Business? I mean, I'd worked for my dad. He owned what's called an MGA or an insurance wholesaler. So, they don't touch the client. The local agent can't place something. They go to a wholesaler or a specialty company. And so we had like 30 markets. But, I'd been stuffing envelopes since I was 12, doing mailers and working in the office. And so I tell people, if you're working in the business, you're learning stuff and you don't really know it. So, by the time I was 17, I was underwriting trucks, which is what I do now. About half of the business we write is commercial auto. So, from day one, I've always wanted to own my own insurance company. And, I'm old enough now where in 94, I went to Chicago and formed Prime, the insurance company. And I did it because I thought insurance guys are stupid. It's evolving in the wrong direction. It's almost like mortgages, right? It almost ruined the world in a way.
100%.
They were all smart, right? Yeah. It's all going to work out.
I actually want to highlight that because one of the things that I really enjoyed learning about you is you have that common sense principle. But now I want to find, where did that come from? Did you get that from your father, from your dad, from your mom? Who gave you the common sense principle? Because it does seem, when you explain things, it does seem logical. It's reasonable. It's illogical.
My old man was into sports, right? Because he grew up on the street and parents were alcoholics and stuff. So he grew up at the boys club. So as kids, we were busy all the time. Day you got out of school, you went to tennis camp, and then you'd go to football camp, and you'd go to hockey camp. You maybe had a day before school started. Keep him busy. And, he was well known with all the kids, youth conference football, and he started youth soccer here. So, he impacted a lot of people, but I think I learned it on the playground, and sports, bullies, and again, when people say, why would you meet with him? Why would and I meet with anybody. I'll talk with anybody. Lawyers now try and get insurance to back up their lawsuits, financing. They either try and get money or insurance to do more lawsuits. And obviously they're our enemy, but what better to do than talk to your enemy and hear their ideas? And, again, I always say, I talk to stupid people all the time. And they're like, why you waste your time? Well, it confirms to me that they're stupid. Right. I mean, why would you not have, and it's situational awareness and a view of the whole playing field? And I do think that's what's wrong with big banks, big companies. They get so far away from the customer and they're so focused on the profit that it gets harder for them to make profit because they're not really providing the service that it was intended to.
And is that a tactic, or is this a something that you saw within the early years of you starting Prime and then X Insurance, or is it something that has evolved over the last 40 years? Because you've been in the game for about 40 years.
When you insure rafting in the Grand Canyon and helicopter skiing, and literally these are experts, right? Mm-hmm. Greg Smith, who started Wasatch Paddlebird Guides, and Joe Royer, who runs Ruby Mountain Heli Skiing now, and Darwin, who owned Glacier Raft, and meeting them in '85 and insuring them when anybody couldn't, nobody else could, and then actually taking a death case to the Supreme Court in California and winning, right? That made an impression on them.
Yeah.
But I was a stupid kid, right? I was
How
in
did
my
that
20s.
feel? Well, because what you just said is that you went to the Supreme Court and you won. In your industry, that's like facing Goliath and winning. Right. You slayed a dragon. How did you feel in that moment?
I mean, that's what gives me the motivation to continue. And, at some point you got to put your money where your mouth is, right? Everybody, I have big brokers call me that do $30 billion a year in premium. And, I insured Drake's Home and other famous people down in Malibu. And I insured the Rolling Stones concert during COVID. And, they say, you can't talk to Mick and Keith. I'm like, okay, well, then I'm not insuring them. Because if they don't want to talk to me, it's like they're Wizard of Oz, right? They want to hide behind lawyers or brokers or agents, and I can't ever make them happy, right? The way you make people happy is you have a deal with them. Yeah. You don't have a bunch of links.
Can you share the story behind that experience with the Rolling Stones? Yeah.
Yeah. It was a broker from London that brought it to me. And, again, in most cases.
And for context for the audience, so they get a grasp of what we're talking about. You're insuring their tour, right? Their concert tour?
Yeah.
What are you insuring?
Specifically, when they do a tour, I think it was 14 stops, they go get financing.
Okay.
So the people behind the money, they want a guarantee that if Mick or Keith die, they get their $10 million back. Or if 4 of the 14 concerts are canceled, because of COVID. And, they wanted it to be 70, because at the time, if you had 10,000 occupancy, they would only let you have 75, or some were 50 occupancy to keep more spread between people. And they wanted it to be 75. And I said, no, you can do a concert with 50. You're the Rolling Stones, right? They'll all show up. So there was some good negotiating. And, again, the best part of the story for me is, where's value in insurance, right? So as an underwriter, you're trying to figure out the right price, right? And with the river guides and the outfitting guiding, I made it really simple, right? Some of them would charge $100, some of them would charge $200, and insurance was done on a gross receipts basis. And the first thing I thought was, well, that's stupid, because I know him. He charges more because he has better guides and better equipment, and you're actually penalizing him because all you're looking at is the gross receipts. But it's simple, right? That's what people say. I just want it simple. Don't you have it? No, you got to actually understand the business and be part of it. So I came up with a guest day rating method.
Okay.
Where it doesn't matter what you charge. Right? If you take 1,000 people down the river or 100 people skiing, that's the exposure. And, the better guys, I give a better rate. The newer guys pay more until you prove them, and you basically reward good behavior and punish bad behavior to have a better underwriting result. So, but you're always kind of guessing. And everybody always hires actuaries to tell them what to charge. And
right.
I don't like actuaries. I mean, I don't like lawyers. I don't like a lot of people. But again, if actuaries were so smart, they should form their own insurance company and go do it.
Yeah.
Right. But they really don't know what they're doing. Yeah. They're guessing, and they're using historical numbers, and there's always new stuff going on, new trends. So anyway, with the Rolling Stones, if it was before COVID, they could have got $20 million, twice what I gave them, for probably $70,000. It was dirt cheap. Then, COVID comes along, and Wimbledon alone got paid $144 million cancellation claim. So, the market went away because nobody ever counted on COVID. And that's, to me, as insurance people, we should know shit's going to happen that you don't plan on. That's why people buy insurance. So anyway, I was thinking, $750. I'm risking my own $10 million. How much do I want? $750. Then I go to sleep. I go, they're never going to pay $750. They paid $70. So then I'm thinking $250, and then I kind of live it for a day. Mm-hmm. See how it feels, right? Right. Because once you actually write it and issue it, you're locked in.
Yep.
So eventually they get tired of waiting for me, right? They're calling, and that's a form of underwriting too, because I know you can't get anywhere. If I don't ever hear from you, you bought it.
So it's kind of like for you a litmus test, like you're testing out where they are.
Same with getting them on the phone. Yep. If you won't get on the phone with me, then you don't even control the client well enough to get him on the phone. Mm-hmm. So it's testing basically. Mm-hmm. And so they get tired of waiting. They call up and they say, "We'll pay you $3 million." So I was nowhere near $3 million, right? But that's what it was worth to them.
Wow.
And no underwriter on the planet would have ever done that, right? They have a can of corn. They've boxed it out. It's kind of like a mortgage loan officer, a banker giving you a loan. If you don't fit the box, you don't get in the box. And then the box has a bunch of exclusions and limitations. And, I always tell people you're more uninsured than you are insured because you've never done a mock claim. Right, I'm going to meet with one of the big sporting teams in Miami, and
are we in the future or now?
Well, I'll be there Thursday. I met with them a couple of weeks ago on their building insurance, and it's a couple $100 million building. It's probably more than that actually, but they have a $36 million deductible, and they pay millions of dollars in premium.
Yep.
So the most likely claim they would have would be $36 million.
Right.
So, that's how insurance works. Mm-hmm. It's, we'll take your money, but we're going to craft it so that, you're probably going to pay your own claims. Mm-hmm. If you ever use your insurance, they cancel you, or they start recrafting it to tip the scales to their.
Is that what you just said? The Miami deal, is that like a big deal for the company?
Yeah, I mean, it would be a big deal. I do some other big deals down there, but it's a new strategy. And I tell everybody, I'm telling all the other insurance companies. So when I give you a $36 million deductible and take millions of dollars from you, and then you have a claim, what do you think you're going to try and do to me? Right? It's not a partnership.
Right.
We're actually at odds with each other. You're going to try and grow the claim to get above the 36 so you get some benefit from it. So, I believe there's fundamental things as an industry we should do that change that dynamic. Because what we're doing is we're making lawyers rich.
Right.
Makes it like a bad divorce, right? If we were partners and we said, hey, we're going to get divorced, I still like you, but split it, pay lawyers $300 to draft it up, and you're done, right? But Florida's homeowners market shows you it's like an experiment in your fridge. Right? You go back 50 years, it fails every time a catastrophe happens. That you shouldn't keep doing the same thing that doesn't work. Yeah. It's called insanity when you do that. So, my idea is I will share the first 36 million with you. Right? So right now, if you have a $15 million claim, you pay the whole thing. Right? With me, I would pay 7.5 and you'd pay 7.5. Because we're partners.
Right.
And, I compare it to if you had enough legal stuff going on, you would hire a lawyer on retainer. Right. That's kind of like paying a premium.
Yep.
So then when stuff came up, would you be afraid to call the lawyer that you hired on retainer? So why is everybody afraid to report their claims? I don't care whether it's a homeowner or a car, a personal car. Everybody's like, I don't know if I should report it.
Yeah.
Why? Why? Because you have fake insurance, and everybody knows it.
And it's going to make your payments go up, everything. Yeah, that's interesting.
The federal flood insurance program is the dumbest thing ever. It's fake insurance because the government is us, and it's not funded. So again, when I write your home or your building, I give you everything you need. Because if your insurance doesn't cover it, who has to cover it? You do. So that's not real insurance.
Right.
So if you put your own money in your own bucket and anything happens to the building, earthquake, mudslide, flood, you wouldn't look at yourself and say, oh, we're not paying that. That's why you put the money in the bucket, is to pay whatever comes in your business. And most businesses I deal with, they know their own business.
Yeah.
Right? Why do insurance companies ask for prior loss runs? Because it tells you what your burn is. If you're burning $1 million up a year in claims, the premium's got to be like $1.5 million. What I knew from day one when I won that lawsuit in Florida or in California, Sains versus Whitewater Voyages, was that insurance companies overpay claims.
Has anybody ever told you that you are actually the most interesting man in the world?
No, never.
Because the thing that was cool is face value insurance, not interesting. Insurance companies, not interesting. When I hear you talk about it, I don't know if it's your ability to break shit down into really like easy to
common
understand,
sense.
right? Commonsensical, but it makes it fascinating. Everything that you're doing is fascinating. Your hobbies, your talents, different things are fascinating. So yeah, I was just wondering, I was like, man, you literally should have a beer and your face should be the actual most interesting man in the world. Because if you guys haven't told, like if my audience, if you guys are listening and watching, haven't gotten the essence of this man, his life is fascinating. He's always driving helicopters. He always has a cigar in his mouth.
That upsets a lot of people. By the way. TikTok bans you immediately.
TikTok does not like the cigar in the mouth. No, it's really cool. And so I want to like highlight some of the stories because you have I don't know if you understand this, you have a lore about you. So the group that we're a part, or the membership group, people talk very highly of you and they share stories of you. So I don't know if you want to put this on the podcast or not, but one of the stories I heard in that interaction between you and the Rolling Stones was you were zipping up this deal. And then you wanted to get Mick Jagger on the phone. And then you got to a place where it was so much talking going on. You just told, hey, everybody, enough talking. Let's zip this deal up.
Right.
And you got the deal zipped up.
Right.
that's the most interesting man in the world.
Right,
You walk into any,
I'm telling you, I'm the most hated man in the insurance business, right? All these insurance distribution guys, underwriters, MGAs, they think I'm nuts, right? And they think the way I do it is stupid. So on the way
what do they think is nuts or stupid about what you're doing?
The people that you think are really smart and know what they're doing, lawyers, and I find that they don't know what they're doing. I was just on a call, and this, and I'm not going to use any names, but it's a Mount Everest expedition, right? I've been doing those for 40 years. This one, they're trying to film and do a movie on. And so it's a big company involved, and they have a big broker involved. So insurance is sold in slices. Okay. So if you are, like a rafting guide, they need general liability, or what's called public liability, business liability. But what happens is over time, they start getting sued for professional liability. All right. So the insurance world, it's two separate policies. So, the requirement for this trip is 10 million limit, right? And I insure this guy on all his other trips, he carries $1 million, $2 million. And that's more than most of them do, because it's a foreign trip and it's highly skilled people, right? It's not novices going to the top of Mount Everest.
Right.
So the wording from the big boys that supposedly know what they're doing say 10 million. Well, when they go to get it from the regular market, they can't get both. So they have to buy two separate policies. So does that mean you buy 5 million of one and 5 million of the other for the total of 10? And, to me, again, these policies never play nice together. It's like wind and flood in storms, or earthquake in your homeowners. When you have two policies that cover one thing, you're screwed, and the lawyers are going to get rich. So, the lady for the, movie company, I'm telling this big broker that she doesn't know what she's talking about.
Right.
Because she doesn't know. She clearly does not know.
Right.
Right. She's supposed to know, and her boss can't be on the phone. My guess is her boss doesn't know either. But, so they think they want 10 million of GL and 10 million of professional. So that would be 20 million. So I issue everything on one policy. I give you everything you need in one policy. That benches the lawyers. That keeps it simple, common sense. More lawyers, more problems. More policies, more lawyers, more problems. So, and how do you tell people they're stupid, right? Most salesmen can't fix your car 100%. Salesmen. So the people selling insurance don't know how the claims work. That's my advantage. Is I went to the Supreme Court when I was 23 and won.
Wow.
And, a lot of, people, this guy with me, an agent from Naples, Florida, he says, "You're the most suspicious dude on the planet." And that's because I always think about every eventual possibility, because I know what can happen. And everybody wants to make it simple. Like, she's on the phone. She said, "You're making this too complicated, 10 million. And I'm like, okay, so is it 5 and 5 equals 10? Good. And she's like, no, 10 and 10 is what we need, because that's what they had in the past. And I said, well, that's because it's only provided separately. If I'll do it together, right?
Yep.
Isn't 10 million good? Because that's what the paper says. And so
you have this reputation in the industry of going to court based off principles. And there was an instance that I really want to highlight the point here, where you spent $750,000 to save from a $50,000, I think it was $50,000 that you were supposed to pay out based off principles. And then everybody around you said that was stupid that you did that. But why was everybody wrong in that situation?
I think it's like the bully on the playground, right? Is he as tough as you think he is? And so, it's principle isn't as important as facts, right? I don't think you can have principles if you ignore the facts.
Right.
So I let the facts drive it, right? If we're not at fault, we should never pay. So again, I had another call this morning with an insured that I've, done for a long time. We've had very successful. He's a big trucking company in Florida. Florida's a bad venue, big trucks, legal hellhole. It's all the fake news that encourages people to settle cases because it's not a fair system. And so this is an extraordinary case because the young man in the accident lost his leg. So immediately, it's not our fault. He's intoxicated, he's speeding, he doesn't have a motorcycle license, all this stuff. So it's not our fault, right? In any court case is liability first, damage is second.
Yep.
So if you're not liable, we're done. So that's the card we have to play, right? We can't say, well, maybe we'll pay $500,000. That's the wrong message, right? You look at me and say, look, we are really sorry, right? But this wasn't our fault, and we can't pay people when it's not our fault. Insurance is to pay you when we're at fault.
Right.
And so again, early on, everybody's fight. And when I'm the insurance company and you're the insured, I hire a lawyer, I'm paying him, but he's your lawyer.
Yeah.
And before I ever underwrite you, I say, look, no matter who I hire, no matter who you talk to, every lawyer on the planet is going to tell you to settle.
100%.
And they tell me to settle. That's when we don't let them lead. They aren't the coach. They're a player, right? Player runs up and says, coach, run it down. No, the coach decides. So when we get to that point, we both have to say the same thing. And, the lawyer's nervous because they've made all their money. They really don't want to go to court and lose. And my strategy, again, is spend more money, do the right thing, and I'll bring in a second lawyer to give him more confidence. Because you don't want to go with a lawyer who's wanting to settle.
Yeah.
Right? So and he was wanting to fight the whole time. He knows it's a good case. He's now just worried about a bad jury. And my answer to him is that's why they have appellate courts. And Trump proved that, right? You lose at lower courts, that's just the first round. Yeah, you got a lot more going on.
100%, yeah.
So anyway, the client says to me, Rick, the lawyer you hired told me to settle. And I'm like, but I told you he was going to say that. So now if you want to settle, I can always write the check.
Right.
But that's math. Everything I do is just math.
Yep.
Right. So really, if we were going to pay the $1 million, we should have saved the $300,000. I can save you money on every claim, but we can't change directions midstream.
Yep.
So anyway, I talk him into fighting. We go to court, and the jury in South Florida gives us a 0 verdict. So I saved him $1 million. Okay. Now his policy's up for renewal. Mm-hmm. So instead of having $1 million, $1.3 million claim on there, he has a $300,000 claim, and all the other insurance companies are coming and underbidding me. And, he's like, you got to, and I'm like, go, right? If you don't see the value in what I do, which is the only thing I can do is manage litigation with partners. We manage the lawyers. We don't let them manage us. And, I did my job.
Yeah.
And you don't see value in that,
you
should leave. So he's got a $200,000 cheaper quote. And I'm not going to, I'm a Ferrari.
Yeah.
I don't compete with stupid. I have t-shirts that I have.
I don't compete with stupid. That is a great axiom. So generally, when we're talking, we talk about the highlight reel. You've been in the game, business owner, founder. Are you the founder of Prime, or are you?
Well, I'm majority owner, founder.
Okay, and then X Insurance is separate. So it's different.
Well, it's all owned by the same holding company.
Okay.
That's, something that, again, fundamentally, my holding company has 50 plus different corporations in it, but it's in an effort to be the most efficient. Mm-hmm. So I don't have to rely on somebody in any other state to file my taxes or execute.
Yeah.
I can bind today, issue today, where everybody else has, other people they're dependent on because they outsource.
I want to talk about the people you employ. How many employees do you have?
I have about 300 between 4 offices. Biggest office here in Salt Lake and Sandy, right off I-15, and then Chicago is the second biggest office. Maybe Exton, PA is right there with them. And then I have a small office in Naples, Florida.
Okay. So 300 employees.
Right.
You're the CEO of both entities?
Well, of the holding company. And then basically I run all the companies. Mm-hmm. I have a really great team. Most of them have been with me over 15 years, some of them over 25, because I brought them along with me, or they were known to me in the business, or I was known to them. So I'm looking for good people, and they're looking for a good employer.
Yeah, I saw that. You mentioned some employees have been with you for over 20 years. The average median you said was between, I believe it's 12 to 15 or 8 to 12? Either way, longer than the average across the country. What do you attribute that to? Why is that?
Well, I mean, again, I think in everything, selling insurance or being a good employer, being a good employee, I think you have to put yourself in the other person's position. Uh-huh. And I tell my underwriters that if you're going to quote that, you turned it around, would you buy that? Could you buy it? Because why would you offer them something they can't buy? Right? Same with an employee, right? If they can go make $17 an hour, why would you waste your time and their time trying to hire $17 an hour people and churning through them? Yeah. I'd rather start at a higher number, hire people who want more money and they're willing to do more for it. But the way you keep good people is you pay them.
Okay. So you pay them. Any other principles that you would say, leadership principles that you've accumulated over 40 years, 4 decades, that kind of attributed to building a strong team, a loyal team?
Well, I think the benefits package, I try and provide the best health insurance, the best benefits package available. If you give people the cheapest health insurance and then their kid gets sick or they get sick and they're out there trying to struggle through, getting a referral and all that stuff, that's not good. And again, I don't want to do that. Why would I make my employee go through that? So, but I do want to give people the sense of opportunity, and I don't want to sit them in a box and tell them what to do. Right? Yep. I want them to have some ideas, and those are my best employees are ones that have an idea, even though, everything I do, I evolve. The question in the insurance business, every agent and broker says, Rick, what's your appetite? What's your appetite? You got a program for this or that? They're asking you, what do you want so bad you'll be stupid? Damn. That's what you want? I'll give you what you want because you'll be the cheapest. And it's like, I don't have an appetite. I'm looking for partnerships. And I tell most buyers, look, you buy insurance policies. You got way too many. And you buy it every year like you're going to the grocery store to buy avocados. 100%. You have no strategy, no forethought. And, when you spend more money, whether it's a homeowner's claim, they pay a homeowner's claim for you and your air conditioners were on the ground and I paid the $800 to raise them, I save money in the long run, right? When I don't pay $1 million claim that other people pay, you're setting a precedence. The lawsuit I won in California, Sanchez versus Whitewater Voyages, since then, release forms have been thought of as being more powerful. So how much money has been saved? And I know that other insurance companies came back in and underbid my price because they thought, release forms are now good. But it's not the piece of paper. It's just like a cop says he has immunity. Yeah. Well, if you wrongfully arrest me, you have no immunity for that. 100%. Yeah. Immunity is your defense. But you still have to get a lawyer. But, when you go to a lawyer and you want to sue a cop, they'll tell you they have immunity. You can't sue them. That's what they told me. I sued them anyway, and I won. I mean, I literally.
That was the advice I received, too, when I had some altercations with police in my teenage years. Right. My brother's a lawyer now, and he's like, you don't deal with them. That's just not what you do. You don't want that on your record. Right. Hey, just fucking principles. It took me 10 years to get over that incident.
So I don't know if you know, but I got arrested in Chicago.
I did. I wanted you to tell that story about you and your brother.
So, I took my kids, my brother-in-law, my dad. Okay. It was big group of us.
So it was a family, but the headline was brothers and...
Two brothers, right? Two drunk brothers beat up cops at O'Hare or something like that. And so, again, I'm telling my dad, family businesses are tough. So I wanted the insurance company. The rest of my family didn't. So I went to Chicago and did that. They stayed here and did other stuff. And so, they're like, oh, you never take us anywhere. So, okay, let's go to Whistling Straits, Kohler Club, have a good week. And my dad, before we go, says, don't take my one brother. He'll get arrested. And I'm like, Dad, he's like 52 now. He won't get arrested. Well, I was wrong and my dad was right. That's the lesson, right? Learn from your lessons, listen to your dad. So anyway, we made it the whole trip. We're coming home, Chicago O'Hare, and it's Father's Day. And so he gets on the plane, and me and my dad are in first class, and the rest are in coach. And he tells a male stewardess, which the paper said they were female stewardess, and he groped her or something. But he told the male stewardess to F off, steward, because he wouldn't help him lift his bag up, and he's got a bum leg and stuff. So anyway, they arrest my brother. They arrest me, and I'm charged with felony assault on a police officer. They say I jumped on him and beat him up and dislocated his shoulder.
Why do you think that was thrown in there if it wasn't true?
Again, I think in big cities like that, good cops don't say anything about the bad cops. And it's a principle thing, right? And I insure cops now. And I tell them I got arrested, right? And you good cops need to call out the bad cops. You need to communicate the message to them. Hey, dude, that's not allowed.
Yep.
Right? That's why all cops are considered bad now, is because there are some bad ones.
Yeah.
And you're never going to get rid of all the bad ones, but you do have to police yourself. So anyway, I told the lawyers I hired, I will never plead guilty. And with a felony, I would have to sell the insurance company. Mm-hmm. So, they gave me the chance to plead guilty to misdemeanor. And the judge told me, Mr. Lindsey, you don't understand, waste the court's time. And I said, with all due respect, Your Honor, I've probably handled as many or more cases than all you guys put together. And I will never settle this, right? No way. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I had a really good judge. We had video that showed I never touched anybody. But when they arrest one person and family member, they always arrest a second. Because if you're not arrested, you're going to be a witness.
Right.
If you're a defendant, you can't be a witness. Yep. Or if you are, you're, not impartial. So anyway, I had to fight hard to find lawyers to sue. They all told me I was going to lose. And I won $200,000.
What did it cost you to litigate that?
Well, the defense to get it out and suing was $380,000.
So you lost $180,000.
Right. But my reputation and everything I have fought for
was worth it.
Again, I've told people for, since the California case, you got to do what's right. You can't wimp out at the last minute and take the easy route. The lawyers are going to tell you that's the better decision, but you need to make a better decision for you. Now, if I would have lost or if I wouldn't have won anything, at least I know.
Yep.
The worst part about settling lawsuits like that where you were right is you'll never know.
Yep.
And it would have eaten me alive forever. I would have thought I could win because I do believe in the court system. And we have cases where we lose and we appeal. They're changing laws all the time, so the playground kind of changes. We just had a case where they wanted millions of dollars. Before trial, we offered them, I think, $6,000, or no, $60,000. Our last demand was like $400,000, but they were up in the millions before that. Mm-hmm. Because we made the offer of 60, and that's an offer that you're trying to not be too cheap on, because if the jury awards more than that, then you don't get your lawyer fees. If the jury awards less than that, then you get all your lawyer fees. So that's kind of like a loser pay system. That's some of the tort reform that's going on. But the jury awarded this guy $6,600. So he now owes us $172,000 in legal bills because it was a frivolous lawsuit.
Yeah.
We would have. But those are the things that, if you're buying a partnership, your insurance company and you see the future value in spending that money, because for the next 10 years, you're going to get the benefit of being fair, right? We'll pay you the $6,600. That was easy math to do.
Yep.
You just made lawyers and wasted all this time, and that's what the jury told you it was worth. And I guarantee you, we would have paid them $6,600.
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer. But the plaintiff's lawyers are pushing everything up, and the insurance companies go with them. And when it gets too tough, they just leave. They just say, we don't insure that anymore. You can't do it.
Yeah.
So, trash trucks, towing operators, any commercial vehicle, anything recreational right now is again in turmoil. The insurance industry is, very focused. Well, like California homeowners, all those companies who left California, they're going to the other states they see as appetizing. California is not appetizing anymore. So they're actually driving rates down in certain areas. But will it survive a test if there's an earthquake or there's a big fire somewhere that's not California or Florida, which, all these fires now are popping up everywhere. Florida and the Keys, they shut down the road.
That's crazy.
New Jersey. And maybe they're just publicizing them more.
You think?
Well, I don't know. It's like,
what's your from your vantage point, top of the perch in your industry? What do you think? Like, what's the reason for all these?
I mean, I would have to look into it to actually, but
you don't have any opinion on it.
Well, I think that there might be people trying to create havoc in areas, right? But I would have to, if people called me in North Carolina or wherever, New Jersey, where these fires have been, I underwrite each person, right? I'm not so much underwriting the house. Obviously, if it's in a wildfire score 100, we look at that. But, the funny thing in insurance is, like, if you go to California where everything burned, right? That's wildfire score 100. So you build a brand new house there. What are the chances another wildfire is going to? It's like 10 years. It shouldn't be wildfire score 100 anymore. Should be a 0.
Yeah.
Because you're the only house. There's no trees. There's nothing to burn anymore. But, maps, flood maps, wildfire maps, they're like rear view mirror.
Yeah.
They're not looking forward.
Yeah.
And, 5-6 years ago, when the wildfires forced everybody to run away from California, people would come to us for quotes. And, I'm like, okay, walk around your house and video me the outside.
Yeah.
And then go inside. I mean, that's the best tool ever. I can be there. I'm like, dude, you live in Hobbitville.
Yeah.
You got more branches and trees and stuff around your pile of wood next to it. Well, when they're complaining. Now, 5 years later, that same house, everything's cleaned. They've removed every shrub and bush 100 feet within the house, because they know they don't have good insurance. So they now have taken action. They're a good partner. So I would prefer to write wildfire people than people who think, I'm not in wildfire.
Yeah. I really want to double click on that too, because one of the things that you talk a lot about is putting in, you're implementing with your partnerships and people you're insuring or looking to insure, you're putting in one step process to hedge your risks. And so the first example that you gave was with the White River Rafting Company.
Right.
Where he's like, why don't you have them swim across the river?
Right.
Right. And most people wouldn't do that, but you did that as an implementation to avoid catastrophe.
Right.
When did you start getting kind of an awareness around like that? It's probably a smart thing to do in your line of business.
Well, again, it was the same guy that I took to the Supreme Court, Sains versus Whitewater Voyages. The guy's name was Bill McGinnis. And when I first started doing the American River and kind of the acceptable, he wanted to do Class 5 Whitewater, which was unrunnable. And, I went with him and I did the same with kayaking. I didn't think you could teach somebody to kayak safely, but I bought a whitewater kayak and I went on an 11-day Rio Grande trip and learned how to whitewater kayak. And again, when you're with good people, that's what they do, the way I do insurance, they can do it, right? We insure the National Ability Center up at Park City where they teach people that are handicapped to ski or snowboard or whatever. So, if you do it right, you can do anything. But it's almost like some people say, I don't want to make them swim the rapid. That'll eliminate half the clients.
Right.
Again, that's the idea.
Yeah. You
really don't want to take people to Mount Everest that aren't prepared for it, right? And people that climb McKinley and Denali and Mount Everest, they're almost professional climbers. That's what they do.
Right.
Novices don't get up there.
I think the things that may be overlooked by people is that not only are you grounded, but you're humanizing. So you humanize employees by building relationships, like just by saying, hey, like pay them what they're worth is such a weird thing to say in capitalism, right? Because it's like most people are looking at profit maximization. How do we get good help? Pay them the least amount. And so for you, you're like, just pay them what they're worth. It's a very humanizing, very like.
But you save money in the long run because most people trying to keep
100%
minimum wage people, they're spinning the same wheel around.
Less than 2 years, they stick with you and then they're gone and then you're spitting it out. So it doesn't make sense. Again, reasonable, common sense and common practice aren't a thing. There's a practice that your company does that I thought was fascinating, the underwriting process, where you talk to every client or customer and in some capacity to like really, see the human aspect of it. What if you could share that story of where that kind of originated from, which was at one point you shared where you were trying to get a bank loan with your business.
All right.
And that's kind of where that process, it seems like that was the origin story of that process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, being a high school graduate and trying to do whatever, I call them the Wizard of Oz, right? They're hiding behind the curtain and don't want to come out. And so, when I couldn't get a loan, I said to the loan officer, well, can I talk to the committee? Because he blamed it on the committee. And of course you can't talk to the committee. That to me is cans of corn, where big corporate entities, they create these paths for you to either make it or get kicked out. And, when you don't fit the box, what people do is they lie. Mm-hmm. Right? Do you have a swimming pool? No. Right? Because I can't get a quote. Mm-hmm. Right? And so to me, that's, just common sense to make sure that you have a meeting of the minds.
Here's an interesting question that I have for you. So there's an author that wrote a book called Skin in the Game, and he talks about eye for an eye. And he says that if you go to certain countries in the world, if you were a construction guy and you built a home and that home killed the homeowner, your life was on the line. You die. And it's if you steal something, your hand's chopped off. Is that an extreme, or is that like, if that level of accountability and responsibility was added to, a layer of our current democracy, would that benefit everybody, or is that like, what's your take on that?
I think it's extreme.
Okay.
Right. So, again, I look at it from everybody's perspective.
Okay.
I think about, one of the helicopter ski deaths we had in Telluride years ago, where this world-class guide, she'd been in Everest and all over the world, all the summits. She wanted to slow down, so she came to Telluride and became a helicopter ski guide. Okay. Which they were happy to have her credentials and everything. And so she's in the back of a group and they're going through this tree section, and the lady in front of her falls into a stream, right? And so there's water down there. So the snow, it's almost like a tree well. And she goes head first in with her helmet, and it goes into the mud, and she's like suction cupped in there. And this lady guide can get down to her, but she can't pull her out. It's like trying to pull a snowmobile. I've had a snowmobile in a river like that. You can't do it. And when it's the helmet actually held her in. And, again, you could say that was her fault. She should die. And even truckers who are involved in an accident and unfortunately somebody's dead or loses their leg, that is like their worst day on the planet also,
Yep.
right? If they're a human being, I'm sure there's exceptions where they don't care, but majority of the people I know, where I deal with them in an unfortunate accident, it ruins their life forever too. So, that's what insurance should do. In other countries, there isn't insurance. You can't sue, and again, there's not an unlimited amount of insurance. That's why the lawyers kind of throw darts to figure out, what the playing field is.
100%. I mean, what you just said too, like similar to the raft, which is there's ups and downs and problems that you have to solve along the way. I've heard a ton about your highlights. What are moments like? What was your biggest loss you've had in the last 40 years? That maybe one that almost took you out for
Well,
good.
I mean, the biggest event that we've ever had was Katrina. So, that was one of the biggest catastrophes ever. And we wrote mainly in Mobile, Alabama, and Biloxi, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have anything in Louisiana, which was lucky. But that was probably the point where we were the closest to being insolvent.
Wow.
And again, it taught me that you can't do half the job. You can't be half pregnant, right? So, and I tried to be, right? I did it like everybody else, where the flood was separate. And that argument, I say, if you put your insured at a dead end road, it's like a bus accident. There's lawyers at the dead end roads. There's lawyers at every bus accident, right? They know where to go. And so, do not take people's money that you're going to abandon in their time of need. And you'll bench the lawyers. And the lawyers hope that insurance companies and insureds argue.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a bad divorce again.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's their best day, is where it's like, well, let's sue your insurance company.
Interesting. Yeah.
Insurance companies have deep pockets, right? So anyway, I think, common sense is way more valuable than anything. And, when people are like, there's a lot of stuff going on now that, to me, if you told me, hey, Rick, let's go mine gold, I'd say, okay, I understand gold mining. We go dig and we find gold and we know what we're doing. You mine crypto? Explain that to me. How do you know when you find it? And, I got way too much opportunity. And the other suspicion in me is there's so many people trying to push crypto.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Why is everybody? Well, it's because if they can raise the whole market, obviously they hold it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And to me, it's just, I've been around long enough. I remember when KPMG had these big tax strategies, right? You do this and do that, save all this tax money. About 10 years later, it was all disallowed. That to me is like, overeducated people figuring out how to make them more money and put you at more risk. And so it's like, dude, I just pay my taxes. I don't want to get really tricky.
Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned that you had like 50 corporations. What are other things? Is everything in some sort of shade of insurance, or do you have other businesses that you're excited about, or?
Well, I mean, I do, I have a premium finance company, but I basically do that so it can't ruin a deal.
Okay.
Right. So agents and brokers have premium finance companies, but sometimes premium finance companies don't want to do certain classes of business or certain states.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can just, continue down the path that I have to. And then, the only other really thing we have is some real estate. And we do some hard money loans. For Paul Millsap, one of the jazz players, I did some financing for him that Zions Bank wouldn't do. And then I got the race teams. I got 2 race boats and
Speedboat.
Kind of into that. So, but yeah, no, everything's kind of insurance focused.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I know. It's what I do. And I just dividended out, $40 million to form another company. If you know who AIG is,
mm-hmm.
Hank Greenberg, who owned that, started Star. And in the insurance business, it's like called a sidecar.
Okay.
So that you have more capacity and more flexibility with more markets. So
you invested in that?
Yeah, I mean, I put the majority of the money in there personally and corporate wise, and then
how's it doing?
It's doing really good. Yeah, I mean, it basically just supports what I do, so it mirrors.
Okay.
And again, if I have a a risk that needs 20 million, right? I can do that now, but if I go to 25, I have to go get reinsurance, and sometimes they won't do it. And so again, I don't like the normal market telling me they won't support me. I think they should. And I always try and have the trump card to say, okay, if you won't do it, I'll just do it without you.
Yeah. So on brand with you being the most interesting man, actually the most interesting man, you own a speedboat team.
Yeah.
What was the draw there where you purchased a team?
Well,
speedboat racing.
I got tricked into it. No, I didn't get tricked into it. I basically, when I started insuring the helicopter ski guides, I went skiing with them, and I thought helicopters were the coolest thing ever. So I started flying back then as much as I could, and then I bought a helicopter here probably in 2000. And then I bought a second helicopter down in Florida, and the guy that helped me buy it, who's an expert witness for Airbus helicopters on any accident, he helped me buy it. And so anyway, he does the boat races. And he's like, so would you want to fly the boat races? I was like, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. And then I met an insurance agent and broker, and he had a buddy that needed a sponsor. So I just started off sponsoring it. And then it ended up not being a good partnership, so I bought him out. And
what do you mean, not a good partnership?
I think I try and treat people like I want to be treated. And I think there's a lot of people out there that don't want to be fair or equal, and you learn that over time. And so, over a year, it was just a nightmare, and so I just bought him out. And then found new driver, new team. Then the boat flipped into Key West, went right over backwards, and had to rebuild that. Got it running last year and did most of the races. And then this summer I bought a second boat. So it's called Pro Class 1. It's the biggest, fastest boats. And there's only 12 boats allowed in the Pro Class 1 series. And so I have 2 of them under X Insurance. And then I sponsor some other teams that are good people, and we all kind of go together.
Is there any what's your favorite sports to watch besides the speedboat stuff? Is there any, do you watch sports?
Yeah, I mean, I watch, obviously the Masters and the normal stuff that everybody turns on. I really, I used to be into the Jazz. Jerry Sloan was a friend of mine. And I had season tickets. When they moved to the Delta Center, I had a suite for the first 3 years. And since COVID and Black Lives Matter and I've lost a lot of respect for professional athletes.
Yeah.
I think that
what specifically happened? Was there anything specifically that happened that kind of rubbed you the wrong way?
Well, disrespecting our country and the flag, and supporting China for their pocketbook. And to me, I think,
what do you mean supporting China? What is?
Well, they all want the NBA to be, in China and sell products there. And I mean, LeBron, I think, makes as much money over there as he does here.
Wow.
So, again,
is that public facing, information that you're saying?
Okay. Well, I mean, I think the NBA, they've had a couple players from China, and I think they've definitely got a partnership. So, it's like I'm a made in America guy. I don't support making stuff other places because it's cheaper.
Right.
I think that's wrong.
Yeah.
I think in the long run, it'll end up coming back to haunt you.
Which it has.
Right.
COVID showed us that.
Yeah. So, keep things simple when somebody's pushing outsourcing. Again, I like in-house people that, if you screw up, you know it.
Yeah.
When you outsource, everybody's trying to hide the ball from you, and you can't fix the problem as easily.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So there's some stories that I've heard about you where you're flying fast and like you're more entertaining than some of these speedboats out in Florida. Where does that thrill seeker aspect of you? Because it sounds like you've got that adrenaline junkie aspect of you. Where does that come from?
I mean, I think that, risk is relative.
Okay.
Right. And everybody thinks mountain climbing's dangerous and, rafting's dangerous. And that's self-preservation.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so piloting to me, and everything is personal minimums and you set your own limits and do that stuff. And so, I mean, I've been called by the FAA a couple of times.
Okay, yeah.
And, it's something that, again, when you have a pilot's license,
Mm-hmm.
The last thing you want to do is lose your pilot license.
Right.
Right. And I have some employees who medicals have taken them out of the game. And I mean, that's just a bad day for whatever reason. So, again, I try and be, respectful but people don't understand helicopters. Right? They think if you land at the office in Sandy that I'm breaking the laws. I've had people pull over, pull in, and yell at my receptionist, and then call the FAA. Then the FAA, and insurance departments get complaints too, right? So people can complain. And the way I deal with all complaints is head on. Right? You complain to the insurance department, we answer you same day, and we tell, and if you have the right answer, it's over.
Yeah.
Same with the FAA. The office, they'll call and say, what were you doing? And I'll say landed, and they'll say, okay, goodbye. Right?
Yeah.
So the funniest one was I was in Summerlin Key in the Keys, and there's an airport there. It's called Summerlin Key Airport. And I'm landing at the airport, and there's a lady on her bike on the airstrip, which she's not supposed to be. And so I stop and look at her like, what are you doing? And she gets off her bike. And then, I was told specifically where to park, which normally you aren't, but they're kind of uptight down there. So I fly by her and I see her dive for the grass, right, out of the corner of my eye. And so, she comes over and kind of says, not cool, dude, not cool. And then just rides off. And so about 2 weeks later, I get a call and she's like, yeah, FSDO in Miami, we got a report you were flying low level around the Keys. And, most places in Florida, they tell you to fly below 500 feet because of all the airports and all the planes coming in above you. So, that's the first time I was ever complaining in Florida. Here in Utah, they complain all the time because there's no airports.
Right.
And so anyway, I didn't match it up. And she's talking to me and I says, oh, so is this at the airport? Is that what you're talking about? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, and I felt bad. I didn't, I don't want to cause anybody any trouble, but, the more, and that one was all fine because I was at an airport. She's not even supposed to be on the airport runway or taxiway. There's signs and stuff. So, and then we did a thing up at Ken Block's place with Can-Am and Cowboy Cerrone and Dale Lambert. And somebody reported me because the guy here called. He said they sent in the video. And I don't know if you've seen it or not, but, I'm really, really low. There's no question about that. But I'm off to the side of them, right? And again, you're supposed to be able to, 500 feet is the rule.
Yeah.
Or being able to, land or crash land, engine out, without damaging people or property. So again, and I go back and watch that video because the guy talked to me about it, and that was my answer. I was like, I was definitely, the way I was going, I wouldn't have damaged any people or property. I would have injured myself, probably. But again, it was something that, my machines I maintain impeccably. They all have what's called the HUMS device on them, which is what the Army has on every helicopter. And it basically forewarns you of, like, if your generator's starting to go out or a flywheel or the engine's getting, it pre-tells you. Yeah. Every time you land, downloads it, sends it
diagnostics
off.
type of stuff.
Yeah, and it's it's more money, but again, that's better insurance than anything because you're ahead of the ball instead of behind it. So, and when I underwrite aircraft, that's my biggest concern is who are the pilots and are they able to maintain it? And a lot of people, like everything, there's a race boat that sold for $2.6 million. It has 7 hours on it, and you can buy it today for $500,000. So because I guess I'm known as the dumbest guy on the planet, I'll buy any boat that's for sale. They're all calling me, and I'm like, dude, I am selling boats. I don't need any more boats. So anyway, but it's good to know that reference point and where the market's going. And I do think that, there's a lot of people that, just like in 2008, went too far out on the limb.
Yep.
And, there's boats and homes and stuff for sale that, wouldn't have been previously, but the chicken always eventually comes home to roost, right?
Yeah. Actually, speaking of that, do you have a take on I think just recently it was shown that we have more home defaults now than in the last 20 years, like today? Or what we do for
credit card debt. I think everybody, like the government, went stupid, right? I mean, it's like they say, rising tides, right? Yeah, rising stupidity raises everybody's stupidity. And, I don't think, I tell my own kids a lot, I'm like, if you were pioneers, you'd just die. You would never make it. Right?
Lay down and die.
Yeah. I mean, imagine how life, and that's why I'm so upset with pro sports and stuff is people died and fought for what we have here. And now people are like, we need to be inclusive and stuff. And it's, what about the people who died and fought 100%. For a better way and to be a leader?
Yep.
So I think it's disrespectful to not know your history. And, again, you see people say stuff that if they actually knew history, they probably wouldn't say that stuff. But that's kind of what I think my job is in insurance. I have to educate people. And some people don't want to be educated. So I'm old enough now where I try and focus on the ones that I can help, not the ones I can't help.
100%. I mean, I'm a first generation American, so my dad is probably he's the most what's the word? Patriotic human being. And he took the, most immigrants are like, well, I love my country. He's like, fuck that country. I love America. And that was like one thing he instilled over and over and over. You can do anything, the American dream. This is the best country in the world. And
well, it's about opportunity, right?
Yep.
And I think the people who don't like it don't want opportunity. 100%. They want a cupcake.
100%. Or a free lunch.
Yeah, I mean, be willing to work and, I wonder, everybody says, what, why were you able to do it? And I'm like, because I never had an exit door, right? It was never a choice for me to do something else. You make mistakes and you learn from them. You make mistakes and you give up. Did you learn from it or did you start over again?
Right.
And so, I don't know anybody else that I know that did just one thing. And seriously, people say, oh, did you want to be in it? No. I was so scared when I was, when you're paying rent, you got a car, and I'm like, how am I going to pay for me and kids and stuff?
100%.
So to me, it was about survival. It was like being a pioneer. Right? You didn't think, oh, I'm not going to go west. You're already halfway there, dude. You got to keep going. Or you lay down and die. And so, and I'm just grateful and I feel blessed that I had the opportunity to see a better way. But when the whole industry is really against you, and, it's like, would lawyers tell us to just pay a case where we're not at fault early on if he's going to tell you no? They're going to say, well, we have to go through this whole process. It's like, no, we actually don't.
Yes.
we can decide today to just pay if that's what we're going to do at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But you're taking money out of their pocket. They're not going to do it.
Where did that disdain for authority come from? That's one of the strongest traits of most business owners and entrepreneurs, especially that are paving their own way.
Well, I mean, I think if you go into most government agencies, you find people who don't like the opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
They kind of want to narrow it and pick winners and losers, and
mm-hmm.
that's not going to build the best society. The best society, the best food, the best animal, whatever. It's about, the one who actually takes action and combines that with learning and the desire to survive
mm-hmm.
and be better. But, in the beginning it was survival for me, and now it's being able to make a difference and have impact. And, I've got all kinds of guys that I used to insure that come work for me. And when I met them, they'll tell people, Rick saved my business. If Rick wouldn't have insured me, I wouldn't have had a business for 20 years. So,
That's a cool full circle moment you just said, which was when you went to the banks, you got denied by the committee. Now you have this behemoth in the insurance world where you go out of your way to talk to every client.
Right.
And then now you're 20 years fast forward, these guys are like, I wouldn't have a business without you. How does that feel? Come on, like, how does that? That's fucking crazy.
I mean, I got 4,000 lawsuits right now that I'm managing nationwide.
Okay.
I got 10,000 insured. So, people say, that, and it to me, I don't look at it like,
mm-hmm.
I look at it like I got to keep plowing,
mm-hmm.
right? And I think, again, most people think when you get to a point, I can't tell you how many girlfriends have told me to just retire.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let's go sail around. And it's like, I can go to the beach for like 15 minutes. Right?
The same way.
I can't do that. If I go to a golf tournament, I can't be there for 4 days. I got 1 day of watching guys play golf, and then I'll go play golf. But I don't want to watch somebody else for another 3 days.
I'm exactly the same way. I'm like, you can only get so drunk on margaritas at a beach before you're like, what the fuck am I doing here? Right? It's like 8 hours, you're like, I'm done. I'm burnt. I'm ready to go.
But I like being in the game. I'm never
mm-hmm. planning
to retire or sell.
So what's the next step? Because right now you have a 9-figure. Is it 9-figure? Are you guys at a $1 billion valuation with all your holding company, or are you at a high 9-figure valuation?
I mean, again, I'm not. People try and get me to do that, and I don't do that. So the current company, and the problem with insurance companies, brokerages just collect fees,
mm-hmm.
so they're easy to value.
Yep.
Insurance companies have the tail.
Yep.
Right. So there's this actuaries tell you what your IBNR is and all this stuff. So, like the reason I formed the new company
mm-hmm.
is because it's cleaner. Okay. So if I say, I want to grow Prime,
yep.
well, I got to bring in more capital, and then it becomes a valuation that,
right.
everybody gets involved in. I'm like, okay, let's just make it clean.
Yep.
I'm going to put $50 million in a new company. No valuation. Everybody puts it in at the same price.
Yep. There's
no employees, no cost to getting it up and running. And, if nobody puts money in, then I own 100% of it anyway. It's just 2 pools of capital.
Yep.
If people want to take me public or whatever they want to do, we can do over here a lot easier than over here.
Right.
And so, just keeping stuff simple,
mm-hmm.
right? And again, I've only raised like $17 million
mm-hmm.
in 30 years, which was the best thing ever. There were times I was trying to raise a bunch of money and I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back now and I tell you, some days your best day when you sold that big account or you did what you thought was good, 10 years later, you look back and you think that was the stupidest thing I ever did.
Mm.
Right. So not raising money, it was depressing to me because I would see them invest in other people and other stuff that actually failed and went broke.
Yeah.
So the fact that I did well proved that they made the mistake. But if they'd have given me the money, I wouldn't be the boss anymore. that's what they all want, is they want control
100%.
of your company.
Yep.
And they'll all tell you, we're going to leave you alone. We're just capital. Yeah, well, as they dig into it and they figure out stuff that's like, yeah, we're not doing that. We're not doing this. And they're trying to make it, what they think it should be. And again, I'm lucky that like RLI, they're a big publicly traded company, and they vote against me regularly on our board meetings. But, again, I have control, so I can trump them. And
so every year you increase the valuation of the business. You send them all the board members or the investors. You send them bottles of wine with their.
No,
you're like, fuck you. Here you go.
I mean, like this year we paid. I think they got $3 million in dividends. I mean, they've got cash dividends and reinsurance premiums for many years, and then they still own the stock they own, which is worth. And again, they value it all the time.
Yeah. Because
they have to put it on their books. So they're publicly traded and it's on their books. And, again, if the opportunity ever comes, I'll make them offers to buy their stock. It's not publicly traded. It's not liquid. So they would either have to find a buyer or we would buy it from them. And
would you ever sell? Or is this a generational?
No, I mean, my 3 boys are in the business, and my plan is to turn it over to them and let them continue it.
Are they as geeky about insurance as you are? You call yourself an insurance geek. Are they obsessed with insurance as well?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, again, it's as a dad, I would, my job isn't to be their friend. I'm their dad.
Right.
And so I would say, no, they're not into it as much as I would. But, the horse that plows the field first is probably a different horse than the one who maintains the field.
Right.
Right. So, but again, putting it in reverse, I would say my oldest son, 35, at 35, I was probably not exposed to as much as he's been exposed to. I was just going to Chicago and, reinsurance and all of the stuff I deal with now where he's been exposed to it. So in some ways I would say they're further ahead than I was, but I don't think they have the tenacity. But their joke is, they know what Rick would do.
Right. Right. What would Rick do?
WRD. That's what they say.
What would Rick do? WRD.
So, and they know me well enough to know normally what I would say, which is either yes or fuck no.
Okay, so this will actually be a good closing message for the audience and for everyone listening. What would you say to 30, let's say late 20s, early 30-year-old business owner, entrepreneur that is on path, maybe they got their first 6-7 figures in the bank or in contracts, what would you say, what guidance would you give them in this moment? Or even like speaking to your sons, what guidance would you give them for the future?
Well, I think believe in something. I think that's, I was in a position where I could see that the insurance world was old-fashioned and going in the wrong direction. And when you see that opportunity, you have that opportunity, it takes action. Right. And to me, I put everything I had into it. Right. When people try and form like the new company, right, my whole idea there is I don't care whether I have other people put money in or not. It's the right thing to do. Right. And so I get approached by people all the time that, need something. There's a roadblock in front of them for, accomplishing what they see. And then when you ask them, well, what are you putting into it? Well, I don't have anything. Well, everybody's got something.
You got to have skin in the game.
Yeah. Everybody's got something.
100%.
Right. But they're trying to protect it. And so, when you won't put your chips on the table, either it's, again, all the big brokers, Aon, all of them used to own insurance companies. So in the 80s and 90s, they all got out of the risk-taking side. And, now in the market we're in, that's what I say to them all when they tell me what to do, or they'll tell me I'm stupid.
Yeah.
And I'll say, well, it's my company. I'm going to do it my way.
Mm-hmm.
And, by the way, you're 20 times bigger than me. Why don't you just take a little bit of your money and form an insurance company, and then you don't have to call me up and ask me to do stupid shit.
Yeah, put your money where your mouth is, boy.
But again, it's either they know it's screwed up and they don't care. Mm-hmm. They like the system the way it is. And, change is good, and I'm sure NASA wasn't excited about Elon coming in and saying he could do all this stuff. And I'm sure they wanted him to fail. Right. Yep, and, so you have to fight through the old to get better. And so, life isn't supposed to be easy. That's what everybody now, and I go down to Naples a lot and I see a lot of there's a lot of fake people down there, but there's a lot of really rich people too. And I just feel sorry for people who don't have a purpose or a challenge or a struggle, where it seems like their only concern is, where their reservation for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is. And, to me, that's why I would never retire. I got to have a game. I got to be in the game, playing, and pushing myself to be better. And I tell my kids, I'm like, look, if my job as your dad is to make you the best you can be. Right? If you want to be a school teacher, I just want you to be a damn good school teacher. Oh, yeah. Right? It's not about money. To me, it was about survival. And it's all worked out. And that's why I really don't count money. Try and, I don't know how much it's worth. Doesn't matter. Can all change.
Yeah. So what I heard you say is find your purpose, find something you can be passionate about, work as long as it takes for you to be successful, gain an orientation of where you are today, and then also map out where you want to be tomorrow, and then stay on that path for as long as humanly possible. And there's no free lunches.
No, it's not supposed to be an easy life. And I don't have, a desired goal like people are now. I think I can get to $1 billion in annual premium over the next 5 to 10 years just because of the market trend. Just what I see. Right. Might change. There might be billions of dollars come in and it goes stupid, and then I won't be able to do that. But I don't see it trending in that way. So,
what you're telling me is you're shooting for the Forbes 400, 100% richest people in the country.
Well,
I'm just playing. No, that's badass.
No, it's. I don't know how big it.
I'm not the last 5 minutes we've been talking. I'm going to cut that out. That was just. I'm curious.
No, that's cool.
Yeah. But where can people find you?
Okay, so I got my podcast, I Hate Insurance.
Wait, hold on. Why the name I Hate Insurance?
Because I just thought of it. I hate insurance, right? I hate the way insurance has evolved.
Yes.
Right? Yes. And so I know everybody hates insurance. That's why they don't, think, tax day is probably a worse day than your renewal date.
Right.
But it's down there, one of your least favorite days.
100%.
So, again, and how do you make a marketing impression? You got to shock people a little bit and say stuff. So then I gave myself the name Insurance Preacher, because when I get on a roll, I think you sound like a preacher. But, I do say, look, a preacher always tells you got to have faith.
Yes.
Right? I don't have to have faith. I know how this system works. Right. I know how insurance works, how the legal system works, and how it's not leveraged by a partnership. It's taken advantage of by the lack of a partnership.
Yep.
So
100%. Okay, so I Hate Insurance Podcast. What's your social media handles?
Rick Lindsey 74 on Instagram, and we got.
You're not on TikTok, right? You got
No, I am, but I think it's R Lindsey 25 or something. Okay. And then the xinsurance.com is the website for my brokerage.
Yeah.
Any agent can come and do business with X Insurance. And then Prime Insurance Company is at primeis.com, which is the actual insurance company.
Sweet.
And we're here in Sandy, Utah, Chicago, Illinois, Exton, PA, and Naples, Florida.
Awesome. Well, I got mad respect. I got a lot of respect for you, Rick. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I'm rooting for you to get to that $1 billion mark. That's going to be really cool. But if we brought you any value today, like, share, subscribe to the podcast. Share this with anyone that's more interested in his line of business. He dropped a lot of good nuggets, and he's definitely counterculture to most insurance business owners. Definitely, if there's any one human on this planet that can make insurance cool, it's Rick Lindsey. So thanks again.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks, man.